The moon hung like a heavy, silver coin over the Oakhaven Pack ceremony grounds, but for Thalassa, the light felt more like a spotlight on her shame. Every year, the awakening ceremony promised a future of power and prestige to the youths of the pack. This year, it was Thalassa's turn to stand before the High Shaman and the Alpha of the Oakhaven. She was the daughter of two respected warriors, and the pack expected a fierce predator to emerge from her soul. Instead, as the shaman's mist cleared, a dull, gray mark flickered on her inner wrist. It wasn't the jagged lightning of an alpha or the sturdy shield of a beta. It was the soft, circular ripple of an omega. A silence fell over the crowd, heavier than the mountain air. Then came the snickers. It started with the high-ranking teenagers in the front row, those who had already shifted into massive, sleek wolves. They whispered about her weak scent and her lack of presence. Her own parents couldn't meet her eyes. In a pack that valued strength above all else, an omega was little more than a servant, a peacekeeper with no teeth. Her boyfriend at the time, Kalen, the future beta of the pack, stepped back as if her condition were contagious. He didn't say a word, but the way he crossed his arms and looked away told her everything. Her life, as she knew it, was over. For the next 3 years, Thalassa became the ghost of Oakhaven. She was assigned to the kitchens and the laundry, scrubbing the grease from the plates of people she had once called friends. They called her Little Lamb. They laughed when she tripped in the mud, and they made sure she knew her place was at the bottom of the hierarchy. Kalen eventually mated with a high-ranking female named Lysithea, and the two of them took a cruel pleasure in ordering Thalassa around. Lysithea would drop her silk scarves in the dirt just to watch Thalassa kneel and pick them up. Thalassa took it all with a bowed head, but deep inside, a strange, quiet heat was beginning to glow. She didn't feel like a weak omega. While the others spent their time posturing and fighting for dominance, Thalassa listened. She listened to the wind, the trees, and the ancient heartbeat of the forest that the others were too loud to hear. She felt a connection to the earth that went beyond rank. But in the eyes of the Oakhaven, she was nothing. The teasing turned into systemic neglect. She was given the smallest rations and the coldest room in the servants' quarters. On the night of the Solstice Gala, while the rest of the pack celebrated their prosperity, Thalassa was sent to the edge of the territory to gather rare frost orchids for the banquet tables. It was a dangerous task, meant to humiliate her, but it was there, in the frost-covered silence of the neutral zone, that she first smelled him. It wasn't the scent of a normal wolf. It was the scent of ancient cedar, burnt ozone, and a power so vast it made the very ground tremble. The scent belonged to someone who shouldn't have been there. Thalassa froze, her fingers clutching the delicate stems of the orchids. From the shadows of the ancient pines, a figure emerged. He wasn't in wolf form, but he was taller and more imposing than any man Thalassa had ever seen. He wore a suit that cost more than the entire Oakhaven village, but his eyes were the color of molten gold, burning with a predatory intensity that made her breath hitch. This was Valerius Vane, the Alpha King of the Northern Realms. He was a billionaire, a titan of industry in the human world, and a god among shifters. He was known for his ruthlessness, his cold heart, and the fact that he had never found a mate. Thalassa should have run. She was a lowly omega on the edge of her territory, and she was face to face with the most dangerous man in the supernatural world. But as Valerius stepped into the moonlight, he stopped dead. His nostrils flared, and the gold in his eyes deepened until it was almost red. The air between them hummed with a sudden, violent electricity. Thalassa felt a pull in her chest, a golden thread snapping into place, connecting her soul to his. It was the fated mate bond, but it was impossible. An Alpha King would never be matched with a discarded Omega. Valerius moved with a speed that defied logic, appearing inches from her. He didn't attack. Instead, he reached out a gloved hand and gently tilted her chin up. His touch sent a shockwave of heat through her body, melting the winter chill. He looked at the Omega mark on her wrist, then back at her defiant, tear-streaked face. He didn't laugh. He didn't sneer. He looked at her as if she were the only thing in the world that mattered. But before he could speak, the sound of howling broke the silence. The Oakhaven patrol, led by Kaelin, was approaching. They had realized Thalassa was missing and, more importantly, they had sensed an intruder. Thalassa panicked. If they saw her with Valerius, they would accuse her of treason. She pulled away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She told him to leave, to run before the pack warriors arrived. Valerius looked amused by the idea of him running from anyone, but he saw the genuine terror in her eyes. He whispered that this wasn't the end, that he had finally found what he was looking for. He vanished into the trees just as Kaelin and 3 other warriors burst into the clearing. Kaelin saw the flowers on the ground and Thalassa's disheveled state. He mocked her, accusing her of laziness and claiming she was probably talking to the trees again. He forced her back to the village, unaware that the king of their world was watching from the darkness, his eyes fixed on the girl they treated like trash. Word began to spread that a royal envoy was coming to Oakhaven. The pack was in a frenzy of preparation. Alpha Mordecai, the leader of Oakhaven, demanded that everything be perfect. He wanted to impress the Alpha King in hopes of securing a trade deal that would save their struggling pack. Thalassa was worked to the bone. She was tasked with cleaning the grand ballroom, scrubbing every inch of the marble floors until her hands bled. Lysithea and the other high-ranking females spent their days choosing dresses, each of them secretly hoping that the king would choose one of them as his Luna. They laughed at Thalassa, telling her to stay in the kitchen so her peasant scent wouldn't offend the royal nostrils. On the day of the arrival, the entire pack gathered in the courtyard. A fleet of black SUVs rolled up the mountain path, led by a custom limousine that seemed to swallow the light. When Valerius Vane stepped out, the air seemed to leave the lungs of everyone present. The power he radiated was suffocating, a physical weight that forced the weaker wolves to drop to their knees instinctively. Alpha Mordecai bowed low, his voice trembling as he welcomed the king. Valerius didn't acknowledge him. His eyes were scanning the crowd, searching for a specific face. Thalassa was tucked away in the back, standing behind a row of servants. She tried to hide, but the bond was screaming. Her wolf, which had been silent and small for years, was suddenly howling with a ferocity she didn't know it possessed. Valerius's gaze locked onto hers, and the cold, professional mask he wore shattered into a look of raw, possessive hunger. He walked past the Alpha, past the beautiful women in their designer gowns, and headed straight for the back of the line. The pack watched in confused silence. They thought he was going to reprimand a servant for standing too close. Kaelin, trying to show off his authority, stepped forward to intercept. He grabbed Thalassa by the arm, intending to pull her away and apologize for her presence. He told the king that the Omega girl didn't know her place and would be punished for being in his sight. The moment Kaelin's hand tightened on Thalassa's skin, the temperature in the courtyard dropped. Valerius didn't growl. He didn't have to. The sheer aura of death that rolled off him made Kaelin freeze. Valerius spoke for the first time, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that echoed off the stone walls. He told Kaelin to take his hand off his mate, or he would lose the arm entirely. The silence that followed was absolute. The shock was so profound that several elders nearly collapsed. Alpha Mordecai stammered, trying to explain that there must be a mistake. He pointed out that Thalassa was just an Omega, a mistake of nature with no standing. Valerius ignored him, stepping into Thalassa's personal space and gently prying Kaelin's hand off her. He then did something that no one in the history of the Northern Realms had ever seen. The Alpha King, a man who answered to no one, sank to one knee in the dirt before the Omega girl. He took her bruised hand in his and kissed her knuckles, his forehead resting against her fingers in a gesture of total submission and devotion. He told her that he had searched for her across 3 continents and through 1,000 years of lineage. He told her that her rank wasn't a mark of weakness, but a sign of a soul so pure it didn't need the aggression of a warrior. He called her his queen. The pack members who had spent years tormenting her were now shaking with fear. Lysithea looked like she was about to faint, and Kaelin was white as a sheet, realizing he had just laid hands on the king's mate. Valerius stood up, his arm wrapping around Thalassa's waist, pulling her flush against his side. He looked at Alpha Mordecai and told him that the debt the Oakhaven Pack owed for their treatment of his mate would be settled in blood and bankruptcy. But Thalassa, feeling the immense power of the bond and the security of Valerius's hold, felt a strange sense of peace. She didn't want their blood. She realized that their cruelty had been born of a small-mindedness she had already outgrown. She looked at Kaelin, who was now trembling and felt nothing but pity. She told Valerius that they weren't worth his time. She wanted to leave this place and never look back. Valerius's expression softened instantly. He agreed, stating that his palace was waiting for its rightful mistress. As they walked toward the limousine, the pack members parted like the Red Sea. Those who had laughed the loudest now kept their heads bowed so low their noses touched the ground. Thalassa didn't look back at the soot-stained kitchens or the cold rooms. She stepped into the car, a world of luxury and respect opening up before her. The Oakhaven Pack was left in the dust of the departing convoy, knowing they had thrown away a diamond because they were too blind to see it shine. Thalassa wasn't just an Omega anymore. She was the heart of the kingdom, and the king would spend the rest of his life ensuring no one ever laughed at her again.